Good evening, everybody. Tomorrow marks the beginning of Mille Miglia, and this is the 99th edition, the most beautiful race, the longest race. And this is the right place to test what vehicles should have been. Today, we resume the revolution, starting from the competition. So, starting from now, I would like to call on stage Beatrice and Bonomi. We can stay on our feet. These are just greetings. Beatrice Sautini, chair lady of Mille Miglia Israele, the scientific committee of Registro Mille Miglia. What should we expect from this edition? I am very happy to hear this question from you. This is our second episode of this talk format with these contents. Last year, we talked about the lines depending on the aerodynamics and the shapes. Today, as the title says, we are going to talk about 1,000 innovation, testing, and experimentation. So we'll be talking about cars like Mille Miglia as a journey that has brought us to meet, to create vehicles. We can feel the beauty, the harmony of the lines and the shapes, but it would be wrong to consider them only in this still moment. They should be considered as a moment of evolution where the needs, depending on the race, were very important. One had to find solutions that would have led to defining the car in a way that was not so clear back then. So Mille Miglia is a journey of innovation that brought technical solutions to affect the design. They had an impact on the aesthetic aspect of the cars. So for us today, this is Mille Miglia. Even more so, today we would like to emphasize that it's a journey and not just a very beautiful museum, which obviously it is. Mr. Aldo Bonomi, the chairman of Arci Brescia, this has been a great year. This is the 99th edition, but next year will be the 100th edition. What does this mean? It means we should do very well this year. That is the key. And then from next week, we'll start thinking about the 100th anniversary. So what I would like to emphasize a lot is that as Mille Miglia, we, as the owners of the trademark, we should continue believing in what we inherited from the founders, their vision, the help they gave us. Because if today we have the Mille Miglia we have today, it's the fruit of a great idea. It's the brainchild of a great thought. And this was a great achievement. It gave us the chance, the opportunity, and our duty today is to carry it on, to develop it more and make it more international. So the foundation is based on the intentions of the musketeers who brought it in Brescia, and we have been able to do it here in Brescia. And so with the institutions, we should be able to do something important. I truly hope, that with our current team and our willingness, we'll be able to reach important goals. We have great ideas. We have a few coins to spare. So financially, we are in a good position. And our chair lady and the CEO, we have great ideas, and we want to do great things. Mille Miglia, Brescia will not only be the city of Mille Miglia, but we are also going to have a smaller city of Mille Miglia. Thank you. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best in your endeavors. Next year, we can't wait to see what you are going to come up with. We are going to look at the great achievements. They'll do a lot of work together with the chair lady. Thank you. Thank you so much. So it's great for you to bring forward this idea of innovation that we like so much about Mille Miglia. We want to look forward and innovate an idea. This is a great heritage that we should enhance. The great thing of working with events of this kind is the truthfulness, is that we all believe, and this is a great achievement for you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, technique, innovation, and control. This has always been the core of the most beautiful race in the world. With our guests tonight, we are going to open the book, The Memory, take a walk down the memory lane, and see the chapters. I'm Mr. Marco Pascali. I am the Vice Director of Quattroruote, and with Confalonieri, we are going to handle this talk, which will be split into two parts, and they are about pioneering and the discovery of speed. We have great guests tonight. I will list them in alphabetical order. Lorenzo Aldizio, the curator of Alma Museum. Cartapani, engineer and creator, one of our collaborators at Quattroruote. Sergio Andrietti, the race support specialist. Francesco Forleo, engineer from the Fiat Group. He will talk about many stories linked with Mille Mafiol. Pierangelo, okay. Sorry. For input analysis, Camardella, he's Deus Ex Machina of this talk and always helps us to organize and gives us a lot of insights. Then Pietro Mazzetti, the Mille Management Committee. So I will start right away with the first talk. I would call on the floor Pietro Camardella, Pietro Paolo Mazzetti, together with Cartapani, Sergio Andrietti, and Francesco Forleo. So maybe we can take both wings. Okay, let's move one over there. Sorry. There is the strategy. So I will kick off with Forleo, engineer. A tester under the wing of, in 1948, 1 Mille. So what did you inherit from that time? What anecdotes? Good evening everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm very proud. I would like to thank Italian Technology Hall of Fame, and I am a member of the scientific committee, Mr. Camardella, who engaged me in this event tonight. It's difficult to get a starting point. It's a nice question. I met the winners of Mille 1948 edition. That is Giuseppe Navona. He was a professional. I was an engineer tester at Lancia in Fiat. He was called to collaborate with us, to give us some ideas on a very special model. That was Lancia Telma Ferrari. We should consider that Navone was a tester at Ferrari. So he was to test the DC-50 in Formula One, then he returned to Ferrari in the 70s, and then he continued with Fiat and continued as a tester. So I met through Maestro. I was in charge of a model as important as Tema, and I was in charge of reliability. And Fiat could not really fail in any way. It was a very demanding environment. So we needed to have ideas from a person who could offer some guarantees. Every vehicle before being handed over to the customer was personally tested by Navona. So there was always something to fix here and there, and he would point out things. But while pointing out things, he would give me some instructions, some ideas, such as, given that he would make me test them, like you can see, you missed this point. And the first thing you should do is that when you're racing so fast in a car, you should look far. It looks something so trivial, so simple from an expert like Navone. You should look far. Don't look at the road right ahead of you. you should try and prevent and foresee what's going to happen. His words were transforming accidents into scares and scares into nothing. So, in all my career, that's something that has always been etched in my mind. Again, looking far ahead. This is, let me interrupt you a little bit. This reminds me of a talk I had a few years ago with Sandro Munari, and I asked him, let's put our hands together for Sandro Munari. He passed on recently. I asked him, a rally driver, what's the secret? He said, there is no secret, but it's about looking ahead, looking far ahead, because the far sight is the key. So I interrupted you because the technique is more or less similar, but far sight matters a lot. So it's not so common when I cannot say that I was a slow driver. I used to drive really fast. Driving well doesn't mean driving fast. With Navone, I was always under the microscope, always being tested. Something else that's still etched in my mind is the sensitiveness around of the kinematic axis. So that is between releasing the vehicle and pushing the vehicle. Navone is the person near Biondetti when he won in 1948. He was slightly above in his early 30s. So he was a fast driver, but he also had a golden backside, I would say. He taught me to assess the kinematics. This is how it works. When we have the rear traction, when we are accelerating the vehicle, the wheels tend to close because they want to take advantage of the road. So what happens? You have an inclination, and then the tires move in a certain way. When we release or we brake, the tires grip the asphalt and the vehicle wants to go on, and this is what happens. So the tires, they become divergent. From convergent, they become divergent. This principle means that when in a critical stage of a corner, I'm negotiating a corner, I should also change my steering angle. So they taught me to just brake slightly without entirely releasing the accelerator so as not to change the angle set by the traction. It looks like some finesse, but when you are driving fast with just a little touch, you have some changes that if you don't control them become scaring and sometimes can lead to accidents. Don't do this at home, please. Don't do this at home. So these are some technical issues. There's another aspect, another very human aspect, that I go back into details of Miglia. A very human side was about handling the rhythm, managing the rhythm. They taught me when you are testing, even you should not, you take the journey, you don't go too fast, not too slow, not at breakneck speed, not too slow. Take a rhythm and you talk about managing the rhythm. So it has to be very smooth, very fluid. So this was how the testing mission was. Going back to Mille in 1948, he told me when we were having a cup of coffee at Mirafiori. So I asked him, how did you win the 1948 Mille? He said, besides, if Nuvolari hadn't broken down, maybe we would not have won. He was way light years ahead. And someone else also withdrew for reasons we don't know. So we were third runners, but going smoothly and consistently, we won. Because the day ahead of starting for the race, they were lucky to fit some headlights, the headlights that were very powerful back then, which allowed Biondetti to go very fast in that end of the Apennines. So when you're talking about developing components, it's things that don't seem so important. So we are talking about headlights, we are talking about wipers. So small components like headlights and wipers can be game changers. So I don't know whether he thought about the headlights or the single headlight added as the third headlight. I don't remember. I'm sorry about that. So I think I've told you something about this. So the thing is, Mille Miglia, besides, let's say, besides developing the components, besides being a stimulus to innovation, it also required some specific skills like Navona's. So as a tester, and back then you had a CEO, like you mentioned, would call us a tester for each and every single Lancia Ferrari tema to a character like that. We are talking about a charismatic person like him. And that was reasonably right. Because when you are driving, we have many feelings, many ideas. We have going to diagnose the feeling and the cause. It required someone with such expertise, or Bruno Cera. Maybe you also know this person. One final question. What's the difference? You are from the Turin School of Engineering and Testing. What's the difference between a tester who was more tested on the road, with experience on the road, the old world of competition, and other people who took other training journeys? The difference, methodological difference, occurred because we tried to make physical phenomena more objective. Navone, Levizzari, these characters, Salamano, you know, these people drove by their feelings. They had a unique sensitiveness when driving. Navone, when he worked at Ferrari, they would bring him the vehicles to be tested. He would test them. I don't know if you've been there, how the Ferrari was back then. Near we had the race department and another workshop near Ferrari's office. In that road section, to and fro, on his way to and back, he would give his feelings. But driving very fast, breakneck speed would bring other feelings. But he had that kind of sensitiveness, and he was so humble. So the humility of these people, these are people who always follow the teachings of their elders, the more experienced people. I learned to be humble listening to a person like Navone. I tried to be humble even in my teachings. I didn't want to be that proud man to look other people up, down. So he once said, it's not that after I taught you some things, I've lost them. I still have my experience. It's just, I have nothing to lose by teaching you something. It's only that there are two of us now who know this thing. But it's about growing. But yours is from an engineering point of view. This meant raising other points that could be documented, not only from the experience of a person like Navona, but with data, accelerometers, the braking space, the tires. So it's about making objective analysis on the data, and that created different development times. Like anyone who met Navone knew that he was basically, maybe he had very little mistakes. I mean, everyone makes mistakes, but he was basically infallible, I would dare say. So you wouldn't spend money. So innovation cut costs, cut time. It enhanced the value in terms of interpreting data, which is the most challenging thing. So we have so much, so much, so much data, and instant by instant that are difficult to translate, to interpret, to analyze. It's a different approach. Thank you.
I would like now to speak to Andrea Cartapani, engineer, very famous due to his skill in dissemination of the information. As an Instagram profile cooperating with the magazine Quattroruote is from a new generation, also originally from Brescia, and speaking about the features of Mille Miglia. So what is now interesting for the new generation, which we know is not detached from the engines world and the car and racing? What do you think is something that drives their interest? Well, I'm speaking for myself. I speak for me and my community, maybe the nerds that look under the hood to investigate the technical sides of cars. It's due to my interest, my curiosity. I like to see at the Mille Miglia as a time machine. I like to experience a time and age that I couldn't see, a technical development that I couldn't see. Nowadays, we discuss a lot, especially on social media, about the development in the car sector, the changes going on. And we see that in the comments as well. We tend to compare cars of today with cars of the past. Think about the cars from the 80s or 90s. We are very attached to those cars and we care about them. They are closer to our memory as well. But sometimes we forget that those cars are coming from a century of technological development, and part of this development was played in the first years of Mille Miglia. That's in the first half of the 20th century. So if we see how cars change in those 30 years, it's something amazing, incredibly amazing. Because if you look at an open hood, look at the engine of a car, maybe it's not the best thing you want to do when you have a failure of your car and you have to open the hood, but it's a good opportunity in controlled environments to see inside of a car. If you look at the cockpit, if you see the automatic carburation levers, you discover a world when car racing was a pioneering activity and pilots were heroes. And it's easier for you to tell that because you can speak about the basic engineering of cars. And I was wondering, and that's why I ask you this, but we are going to talk about something that is not completely new, but it's interesting about the Mille Miglia. We are going to talk about that through our channels. And we did a huge discovery. And on Quattroruote, you will find that this is an incredible anniversary. Yes, it's correct. The 8-cycle engine is now celebrating 150 years. So the engine as we know it is now celebrating exactly 150 years. This is a great opportunity for us to re-experience the development in the engine world. And I was struck by another aspect while I was researching and reading many documents about that. 90 years ago, in the edition number 10, 1936, they established the special class for cars with alternative fuel. And that was strongly desired by Mussolini because we had sanctions in Italy back then. We had no fuel, so they were looking for alternative fuel. And it's quite incredible to think about how we are talking about alternative fuel nowadays. We are doing that to look at more ecology in the car world. But in the latest months, maybe we are talking even about a lack of actual fuel on top of the ecology aspect. So it's interesting seeing how in a car race history can repeat. There's always something to learn. Thank you, Andrea. Now I'd like to speak to Paolo, Paolo Mazzetti. Through your incredible work on the Mille Miglia register, you are now a well of knowledge. You are a sage. You gave us insights, and we were talking about uh, something with the engineer earlier about how Mille Miglia brought forward new accessories, new technology. Of
Guarda per
course,
esempio questa foto,
just look at this
è del
picture here. This is
1928
dated
e a
1928.
testimonianza che Vincenzo Lancia era sempre un
And as
passo avanti.
Vincenzo Lancia was
Le
always
lambda
ahead,
della foto
proof
sopra,
is that
vedete
the
quello
lambda in the
strato
picture above, you
montano
see that
un
that
primo
box over there,
tentativo di
that's a
tergicristallo,
first
perché il
attempt at a
tergicristallo apparve
windshield
secondo me come da
wiper
serie in
because it
America
appeared
solo nel
on a standard
1926,
car
chiaramente su
in
modelli di lusso
1926, but it was an
La squadra
extra
Toto,
luxury
che tra
car.
l'altro ha
The
dominato le gare,
team in
perché
the
Alfa
picture
Romeo
below,
andava
that was
molto più
also
forte
winning
della Lancia,
every race because
dove
Alfa
16
Romeo was
secondi
stronger than
più
Lancia,
ingegneriano,
and it was
però
winning with
l'acqua
the 6C
mancava mano, perché se
1500.
guardate la foto non
You
c'è
see
più
that water
tergicristallo.
was
Questo
removed
per
by
darvi
hand,
poi
no wiper on
vai
those
nel
cars.
1930
So
l'anno
if you go
successivo,
to the year
Nuvolari
1930,
vince con Alfa
Nuvolari
Romeo con
is
questo
winning with Alfa
tergicristallo
Romeo
che
and
chiaramente
a
avendo preso
windshield wiper
ispirazione
because they took
dalle lambda
inspiration from the
hanno
Lancia
fatto
Lambda,
fare il
and then
tergicristallo.
everybody started to
E
mount
sempre
the
rimanendo in
wipers.
quella porzione di
And once
velivolo,
again,
vedete che qui i
if we
vetri, i
keep talking about
parabrezza
that
sono
part of
tutti
the car, you
piatti,
see that
perché
windshields are
all'epoca ancora
flat
non si
in all those
conosceva la
cars
tecnica
because
per
back then
riuscire a curvare e mantenere
there was no
brutto.
technology to
Tenete
curve
conto
the
anche che
windshield
quelli
while
erano
maintaining
vetri
its toughness.
praticamente
And
pari a queste
those
finestre, se sono
windshields
uscite
were
via
like
perché l'uso era pericolosissimo perché
windows
diventavano
in houses.
fogliari. In
They
quegli
would
anni
break
apparono
down
i
and
primi
become very
prototipi
dangerous easily.
vetrolaminati che sono
And
praticamente
in the later
due
years,
vetri
laminated glass
accoppiati con
started to be
un foglio
introduced.
di
That's basically
plastica adesivo in
uh,
mezzo e
two
quindi
layers of
diventavano
glass
più
with a plastic
compatte
layer in
stanate.
between so that
Ebbene, chiaro
blades of
che
glass would
questo
not
ce lo
form upon
dice per
breakage.
esempio il designer,
And
poter
our
disporre di
guest
un
designer
vetro
here can
alla
tell
bella
us
forma che
that
vuoi,
when you have a
piuttosto
glass that you can give
vedete
it the
questo è il
shape you want is a
vetro
huge advantage. You see,
del
this
Lancia
is
Aurelia. Se puoi
the
tornare un
windshield of
attimo
Lancia Aurelia, but if you
indietro,
can go
ecco
back one
vedete
moment,
qua, questa è
you
una
see
foto
here,
straordinaria di
this
un
is an
fortunato
incredible picture
collezionista
of a
americano
lucky
che ha potuto comprarsi
vintage collector from USA
vetture che hanno
who
vinto la
was
Mille
able
Miglia.
to
L'ultima, la
purchase three cars who won Mille
535, è
Miglia.
quella di Taruffi
The
del 57, ma quella
535
è
is
una
by Vincenzo
marchetta per cui il
Teruzzi,
parabrezza è meno
the
importante.
first one.
Questa invece è
But
la
the
724,
one,
quella che
set at
vince, tutti i
724,
motivi che
you
fanno
see,
Italia
the blue one,
724 del
is the
mattino,
one who won.
è
It
quella con la
started at
quale Giannino
7:24 in the
Mazzotti
morning,
trionfò nel
and Marzotti
1950 e
won in
vedete
1950 on
la
that
riga in
car.
mezzo al
And you
vetro
see
perché
a
non c'è un
line
vetro
in
curvo, sono
between
due
the
vetri
glass. It's because
diritti
they are two
montati con un
flat
angolo in modo da
glasses
favorire un po' l'aerodinamica, ma
mounted
già nel
with an angle to
1950, quindi la
promote aerodynamics. But
405,
in
che è
1950,
quella che
so the
invece
car
è stata
405 in the
usata da
back,
Villoresi per
used by Gigi
sostituire la
Villoresi to
452,
win the
vedete che
next year,
non è
1951,
tanto
you
curvo,
see that the
però
glass
già
is
si riesce
not
a dargli una forma
that
che
much curve,
favorisce
but
quindi
it
chiaramente
can
anche
express
l'andamento della
a
macchina. Vedete
kind
che
of curve that follows the shapes of the
azzurra
car.
di Giannino,
The blue car
già la
of
punta
Giannino,
sopra deve
you
essere
see
un
that
po' ad
the
angolo
tip
perché
above must
inevitabilmente il
be angled
vetro ha la
because
sua forma.
the
È
glass
chiaro
is
che
made with an angle.
tutte queste
Now,
trasformazioni,
of course, all
queste
those
evoluzioni
transformations,
avvenivano più
all those
facilmente su
evolutions
gare come
would
la
happen
Mille
more
Miglia, che
easily on races
durava
such as Mille
le
Miglia
prime 21 ore, le
that would
ultime, il
last
record
at
di
the beginning
Moss
21
sapete che è di
hours.
11
Then
ore
you know the
qualcosa,
record is
ma che
11 hours and
affrontando su
something, the record by
strada
Moss.
aperta come
But
succedeva
when
spesso
it is a
in
race done on
pista,
open
dava
road,
molte più indicazioni che
such as
non le
common car
competizioni a
drivers,
circuito
it
dove le
would give you
macchine
much more
non avevano né
satisfaction
parabrezza né
rather
vetri.
than circuits
Ma
where
lo
cars had
stesso
no
Canestrini, che
windshields
è
and no
uno dei
nothing.
quattro
And
fondatori,
Canestrini
dice
himself, one of the
proprio che
four
la Mille
founders,
Miglia, ancor prima che una prova
said that
sportiva,
Mille
era un
Miglia, before being a
punto di
sports
stimolo,
challenge,
incremento tecnico
is
dell'automobile, una
a
mobilitazione
stimulus
di tutte le forze
for
produttive
evolution, a
operanti in uno
mobilization of all the
specifico settore.
automotive
E
sector
aggiunge in un altro suo
to
scritto:
go
non
towards
si può
evolution. And
dimenticare l'apporto dei
he adds
costruttori
that you
di
cannot
accessori di quella parte,
forget
cioè di
the
vetture
contribution
che
of the
normalmente
accessory
vengono costruite da fabbriche
manufacturers,
specializzate come
parts that
impianti
are made by
elettrici e sistemi di
specialized
alimentazione.
manufacturers,
Ecco,
such
qui
as
vabbè c'è l'Aurelia che fu una delle
those
prime a
small
montare il parabrezza, ma se andiamo
items
avanti con
such as the
qualche foto
windshield wiper
credo che
that
ci
makes
sia,
the
ecco per
difference.
esempio un grande,
You can see
torniamo solo
here
qui,
on this picture,
l'alimentazione delle automobili, questo qua
here
secondo
you
me è
see
un
a four-barrel
capolavoro di ingegneria
carburetor,
mondiale, cioè
which
ma
is a
tre
masterpiece of
carburatori
engineering.
quadricorpo,
It's
come
three
facessero a farli andare a
four-barrel
moto
carburetor.
non
How
lo
could they
so.
work in that situation. This is a masterpiece. When you have three two-barrel carburetors, sometimes they don't work. In this case, we had three four-barrel carburetors. The car here won in 1957, and the same engine, the difference in the alimentation of the car is very different. So much so that Moss achieves this record with the first direct injection and not with carburetors. The following picture seems very trivial, but it is not. You see the pedals of Alfa Romeo that won in the year 2930, the throttle in the center, the brake on the right, and the clutch on the left. Everything changed. So the pedals are also fixed horizontally, then they would get fixed vertically, and now they are attached above. So it's clear that on an open road, such as is the layout for Miglia, 1600 kilometers, you wouldn't imagine how many times they're shifting gears. Of course, many times. So it was much more useful for the automotive industry rather than circuit racing. One question about that. The tire has also been evolving so much, right? We know the tire as it is today, but it was evolving over time. Yes, of course. Nowadays, they are designing at PC. Back then, they used to do that practically. In 1934, for example, there was a challenge among Alfa Romeo, because the official Alfa Romeo team with Nuvolari had Dunlop tires from England, whereas Alfa Romeo from the Ferrari team, because in the beginning Ferrari would have cars from other brands racing, especially Alfa Romeo. Their number one pilot was Varzi with Pirelli tires, and there was a great competition before the race. And what happened was that it was raining very hard, and the two pilots, very strong, great champions such as Varzi and Nuvolari, they saw at the end Varzi winning from Ferrari, because Ferrari thought with a tool that they used to make incisions to make some diggings also horizontally on the tires, so that water could drain out of the tire. The Varzi's car would keep grip much better, so that's why he won. And since then, they started to make those indentings in the tires much more horizontally than vertically, as you can see nowadays on tires. Thank you so much. So this gentleman here is Sergio Enrieti. Every time I met him, he gave me incredible cars. GTA M from the Alfa Romeo Museum one time. Another time, gave me a Delta Integrale with 99 kilometers. Truth is, he worked in Osellam, he worked for Etaljab, he worked as support in many situations, especially because he was part of the Delta Integrale development team. I will kiss him later. I bought it new from 1992. I know that car. But there is something incredible about that car. Every time we look at the Mille Miglia, we see all the support staff doing something incredible. Nowadays, with support media, but with a modern approach. So what is road support? How do you provide your assistance along the Mille Miglia? And you followed many of them, right? Yes, I did follow many of them. And first of all, I have to say that Mille Miglia, throughout the years, has always been very well organized, and that is important for the assistance. It is well overseen. The directions were always very correct. So it was all around very well organized, and I'd like to give my congratulations to the organization. Also, thank you for inviting me here. I can be among you. So, assistance in such a long race, such a tiring race over so many kilometers, on cars that are also 100 years old sometimes. If you're talking about a 1928 car, just 2 years, they are 100 years old. Something is always going to miss, right? Yes, exactly. Because we have to make a distinction, and I will do that briefly due to time constraints. But first of all, track assistance. You can have vehicles to provide assistance. You can have spare parts. You can have assistance for rally races as well. You can have it sometimes. You can have assistance vehicles, especially with the larger teams. But the vans are the ones that follow mostly the cars with spare parts that you might want to have because you might break suspensions, those parts that are more prone to breakage. But for cars such as the ones made before the World War II, well, first of all, you cannot have all the spare parts you need because those cars, sometimes you have to rebuild them because there are no spare parts available anymore. Second, you must put them into the condition of repairing them in any condition. If it's raining, if it's hot, if it's cold, if it's overnight, you have to repair those cars if something happens with what you have. Always, of course, trying to reach the next leg. And there's a lot of organization and logistics because as soon as the car enters the special test, and that's why I was saying that organization must be very well done because you have to assure road safety. You are traveling, you're racing on normal roads. So you must drive according to the rules of the street, more or less. So you have to take the car into special tests. And so you must, in a way, take them as soon as they get out of the special test. So I wonder, who is the right mechanic for the road assistant? What type of character, what type of experience must they have? Well, the best, the ideal man that follows the car and repairs it must be fit because you don't sleep for a week, and I can assure you, I wasn't sleeping for a week. In 2019, I remember with 6C 1500 by Alfa Romeo that won the race. We won the Mille Miglia. And it was Giovanni Maceri was driving. So that year, we should have retired the car because I remember in Bologna, before the end of the leg, the pilot told us that the car was not driving smoothly. So this is something true that we experience on our skin. So what happened? The car went there, he left the car to us in the hotel's garage. We started looking at the car and we realized that there was an issue to part of the engine and chances, the odds, because if you want to provide assistance, you must have the main spare parts you need. So you have to take into account the weak points of your car. And so I'm thinking about the windshield wiper. It's a car hold. If it doesn't work, it's such as an engine not working, technically speaking. So going back to that car, the car was not going smoothly. So we found where was the problem. We take away the distributor, and the one we had wouldn't fit because it was slightly larger in the connection. So what we did, I basically, and I swear, I spent all night long trying to polish and trying to reduce the diameter of that part. And I did manual turning basically all night long. And in the morning, when the pilot went back down, I was just done with work. So I just dropped my bag in the room and I took it back again, and I followed and continued my work.
So I repeat, assistance support on this kind of cars. It's really a nice thing. It's beautiful. It's challenging, but at any condition, you should be in a position to rise up to the challenge, to do some patchwork, to solve solution, even with a metal wire. I mean, maybe you don't have all the equipment you need, but I could tell you many of these stories. Okay, Sergio. Maybe we don't have enough time, but it's about creativity. Maybe tonight we can talk about this episode. This is an event. So on Ruoteclassiche, there was an article on the heroes, on the support team, on the crew, on the support crew. So Pietro, my panel is over now with thousands and thousands of stories. I'm always enchanted by these charming stories. I'm still that little boy who used to dream, who had already memories of Mille Miglia. I was born in 1957. Francesco had something to add. So if you will allow me, let me just add something. 30 seconds, that's more than enough. Okay. So in terms of times and clocks, besides the beautiful things they have mentioned, I would like to point out that a vehicle is an integration of systems. It's a complex system, but it's an integration of systems. But the functional parts, we've always said many times, which is the most important part, which is the beating heart. Then I thought of the watchmaker. You know, a watchmaker had a student who was learning. So you've been working for some time. So, in your opinion, which is the most important part of a watch, of a clock? The boy was wondering, it's a bit tricky. Maybe he wants to fire me. So maybe it's the striker, maybe it's the main meshing. But he raised an eyebrow and said, in a clock or a watch, there is no important part. Even the smallest element, even the tiniest of the parts, if we remove it, the clock stops, the watch stops. So that's the concept of enhancing the systems and subsystems that are functional in a vehicle. So, thank you. Sorry. So, thank you so much to my guests. Thank you, Cartapane, Sergio Rieti, Francesco Forleo, Pietro Camardella, and Paolo Mazzetti. They'll be back shortly. So, see you in a short while in the next panel. So, I leave the floor to Laura Confalonieri.
Buonasera a tutti.
Good evening everybody. Thank you, Laura.
Grazie Marco.
Thank you, Marco.
In realtà Pietro e Paolo,
Pietro and Paolo,
palco,
you can.
siete ancora
The stage is still yours.
Abbiamo
It's
visto
still your
come tanta
turn.
tecnologia
So we've seen that
si è sviluppata grazie alle
technology
intuizioni
has
dei
developed a
tecnici,
lot because
intuizioni
of
che dovevano risolvere dei problemi
things,
concreti
solutions that
che
are
si
to be found by
manifestavano in
technicians
gara.
because there were
Sì, perché non
issues
c'è
that
miglior
arose
banco
during the
di
race
prova
because
nella
there is
gara.
no
Rischiare in
better
calcolo per vincere
test
sul
stage
campo.
than
Ed è proprio
testing
di
things
questa
on the
parte un
stage.
pochino più
So
vissuta che
this
parliamo
is
adesso
more
con i miei
about the
prossimi
experience
ospiti,
with my next
che
guest. We
invito
are going to
sul
talk
palco
about
e che sono
their memories.
Lorenzo
That is
Ardizio,
Lorenzo
curatore del
Ardizio,
Museo Alfa
curator of the
Romeo
Alfa
di
Romeo
Arese,
Museum in Arese. Pierangelo Mafiodo, designer and driver. And obviously our two experts, I would like them to take the stage once again, Pietro Camardella and Paolo Mazzetti. Welcome, welcome.
Questa qua la tiene, la diamo a
Let's give this one to
Pierangelo
Pierangelo Mafiodo.
Perfetto.
Okay, great.
Allora,
So
adesso parliamo
So
della
now
meravigliosa
let's talk
favola delle
about
gare
the
su
fairy
strada.
tale of road
Corse su strada
racing.
è tutto quello
You know,
che si porta
road
dietro
racing
in
and
termini
what's
di
behind the
fatica,
scenes
di
in terms of
intuizioni, di
fatigue,
rischio, di fortuna,
risk,
fortuna, di successi
luck,
e di
bad luck,
insuccessi.
success and
Storia di
failure.
macchine, storia
It's
di
about
piloti,
cars, it's about
di
drivers,
meccanici, di
it's about
tecnici.
mechanics,
Lorenzo,
technicians.
cominciamo
So,
da te.
Lorenzo, let's
Se
start from
la
you.
Mille Miglia è la
If
corsa più
Mille
bella del
Miglia
mondo,
is the most beautiful
quali
race in the
secondo te
world,
possono essere
in your
le
opinion,
Alfa Romeo da corsa
which
più
would be
belle
the
del mondo?
Alfa Romeo race cars, most beautiful ones in the world? For someone who has to do with Alfa Romeo, Tokyo Mille Miglia, it's an easy task. You know, Alfa Romeo dominated the part ahead of the Second World War, and they had all been designed by the same person, that's Vittorio Aiano. All those cars today are still very much current affairs. They are one of the most popular vehicles in Mille Miglia. You always find them in the heart of the fans. So picking one is very tricky, but there are vehicles I would say are the most prestigious. So let's mention three. So it's a personal list. It's based on my taste because we have no, we have who has won more or less, but I would start with 8C 2003, which almost won in
Il nostro
1931.
regista ce la mostra adesso.
So
Perfetto.
that was the only time that Alfa Romeo did not win at the debut. We expected Alfa Romeo to win at the debut, but Mercedes by Caracciolo won that event. But then it won 3 in a row. In 1932, that was the revenge, and that made a legend of it. Then it had won Targa Florio, Mille Miglia, 24 Hours of Le Mans. It won some Grand Prix in Monza. So the beauty from an Alfa Romeo standpoint, when a project is done well and it's a winner project, it must be perfect. But if something is done well, it must also be efficient. And so this was a flagship project. I would say that this man really knows what he's talking about. The second vehicle, among the most beautiful, is a strange vehicle. It's like an alien from the Alfa Romeo world, but it was unique. That is the T4B from 1935. It was similar to 8C. 8C won had raised the bar so much. Now both the Maserati and Alfa Romeo had really debuted and are transformed, brought in 2 Grand Prix vehicles. So Tipo B was a Grand Prix vehicle. It won everything there was to be won, 32, 35. And that was Nuvolari won in Nürburgring on this vehicle when he broke the German vehicle's dominance. That very same vehicle with an additional seat, a small seat, with headlights and a little more, it also won Mille Miglia. It's a beautiful vehicle. Here it is. But the shape was a bit funny. It's a Grand Prix that had been transformed into a sports car. But this technology that goes from the road to racing, this is a Grand Prix track vehicle that not only won Mille Miglia on their own, but it became a design project even for others. The next step, this was really pure sheer beauty. That is the 2009. It won before and after the Second World War. This car, up to date, is still considered one of the most beautiful in terms of the perfect balance between the shape and the function. The efficiency, the function here was wonderful. It won 3 times. It also won in 1947, 10 years after the design. So this vehicle was more about the sheer beauty. If I had to pick one, because you told me to pick one, I would pick the 1938 one, the one that won the last Mille Miglia before interruption in the full trip from Brescia to Rome and back. So it won a lot. So it had a perfect balance between the aesthetic part of it, the efficiency, and the beauty. So it had that charm that still draws a lot of accolades worldwide.
Pietro,
So,
abbiamo parlato di
Pietro,
Vittorio
we've talked
Iano,
about
abbiamo
Vittorio
parlato
Iano,
dell'8C,
we've talked about
ma
8C,
Iano, prima
but
della 8C,
Iano before
ha fatto
8C
una cosa
did
meravigliosa,
something
che è stata la
wonderful.
6C,
That
che ha
was the
legato il suo nome
6C,
in maniera
and that
eterna, direi,
bound
alla
his
Mille
name
Miglia.
eternally to Mille Miglia. What would you tell us about 6C? 6C? 6C was the head of the family, of the Mille Miglia family. It won the first edition in 1928, 29, 1930. And so this was some of the most prestigious, important cars. In this specific case, they were a test bench. Everyone thought that things would not change a lot, and so it could be sold as it is. It could race on the road, race Mille Miglia, just because of its inherent characteristics. The 6C 1005, he started moving the engine to and fro by a few centimeters until he found the perfect balance that allowed 6C 1005 to win the 1928 edition. That was, it had been thought, tested, conceived for that specific purpose, and it opened the world of balancing weights, improving speed, not just the power, not only the sheer speed, the raw speed. It was very modern, and that was an eye-opener for Alfa Romeo. So the 1928 was not only the first of the 11 wins, but it was also the beginning of a design philosophy. So up to now, I hope we can still continue
Ecco, hai
this
parlato
in the
della
years to
prima
come.
vittoria, quella del 28.
So we talked about that 1928 win.
L'altra grande vittoria
That
che tutti
another
ricordano è quella del
big
30
win was
in
the
Nuvolari,
1930
quella famosa
by Nuvolari.
della
That
sorpasso
was
su Varzi
the
a fari spenti,
overtaking
se è corretto.
Schwarzi with the headlights
Cosa
off.
dicono gli
So,
storici al
what do
proposito?
historians say about
Io ti
this?
dico solo una cosa.
Let me just
Molti
mention
dicono
something.
che tratta
Many
su
say that
leggenda perché
this was
fanno
just,
il calcolo del però brevemente
that was,
per chi non la sa.
it's a myth, some say.
Con il distacco che
But
potevano
with the
avere,
difference, the
Nuvolari,
gap,
se fosse riuscito
if
a superare
Nuvolari
Varzi, avrebbe
had
vinto
overtaken Varzi, would have won Mille
Chiaramente
Miglia.
doveva farlo
Obviously,
senza
he
ottenere
had to do
grande
it
resistenza.
without
E la
a
storia
lot
è
of
che lo
resistance.
avvicinò
So
prima delle luci
the story is
dell'alba
that
nei
he
pressi
approached
di
him
Verona,
near
e
dawn,
a
near
fari
Verona,
spenti lo
and with the headlights
sorpassò
off,
per
he overtook him and
Allora,
lit
molti
them
dicono che
afterwards.
non sia vero.
Many say
Io
it's a
ho
myth, that it's
avuto
not true.
l'onore di conoscere
But
Gianbattista
I
Guidotti, che
met
era
Guidotti,
colui che
who was
girò la
Che
levetta
girava
who's
la
the
leva.
person who turned the
e lui mi ha
switch.
giurato che la storia
He
era vera.
sworn to me that he swore that it was true. 1950 at to Hotel Victoria, with all the survivors, say it. And so, if they say so, I believe it. We also want to believe that.
Vittorie non sempre
So,
ottenute, ma
talking
magari qualcuna
about
anche mancata.
wins,
Dobbiamo
there
citare
were
un
some
altro
missed
caso, giusto,
chances.
Lorenzo?
Among many wins in 1930, I would like to add something small. Nuvolari overtook for the first time, broke the 132 kilometers per hour barrier. That was a lot. Thinking it's not that much compared to today's cars,
Le strade non erano asfaltate.
but most of the roads were not tarmacked. And we didn't have the peak speed at 300. It was 165 in terms of peak speed. Going at that range, at that speed, that was something inconceivable today. But this is things, not everything really goes well. Sometimes we have some misfortunes. Maybe one regret could be the 1953. That was beautiful. It missed, they didn't win for 3 times because Alfa Romeo brought 3 vehicles. with 6-line cylinders. It was a very modern vehicle. It had inboard rear part. It had a very advanced engine. It had a very modern engine in terms of operation. It had everything it would need to win. Competition was not that sharp. The first part of they broke the chassis initially, then Klink's vehicle took the lead, broke the second record, the second section, and then also broke the chassis. Fangio, who is known in other races, is known to be someone who's very careful, realized there was something wrong, tried to preserve the vehicle as much as possible. He almost reached Brescia. He realized that the chassis was breaking, and he tried to reach with a rear wheel that was moving, but then he was overtaken by Ferrari a few kilometers from the end of the race. The next day, moving the vehicle, the chassis broke. So, missing a chance to win with the faster vehicle 3 times in a row. For the fans, it was a great regret. But Miglia is about reaching the end of the race. It was really a true loss, but it's still a regret.
E ce n'è una invece che
So,
riguarda
tell
una
us
vittoria di classe
something
che
about
però è entrata in qualche modo
class
anche quella
win,
negli annali
a classy
dell'Alfa
win,
Romeo.
and that went down the records. It's easy to remember the 11 wins. It's like a mantra. It's you can remember the winners. But truth be said, Miglia is what it is because besides the peaks, the absolute, there were other categories. Alfa Romeo has not always been dominant. The years when Alfa Romeo dominated the absolute race, it did not dominate the lower ranks. But Alfa Romeo at one point thought it was not going to win the absolute race. It was the days when Mercedes and Ferrari were dominating. So the Giulietta Spring Veloce reached 11th. It ranked 11th at the end of the race. It won its class by far. But what made this win even more memorable is that the following year, 37 of the starters, one of them was Giulietta Spring Veloce. This kind of win for a brand that was not meant mainly for racing cars. In 1956, Alfa Romeo was making 500 vehicles per day, so it was an industrial company. So playing such a significant role with that brand was a great accolade for Alfa Romeo. So maybe it's not the same level, but it's really close. Something we really care about is Gobatti was a private racer. He bought his own car, and he won this category to the happiness and the joy of all the people of Brescia. Mafiodo, you are a designer.
Lei ha vissuto il periodo d'oro del design
lived
italiano,
the
prima
designer
da cartone, poi con
golden
Gandini,
age
poi
with
sul studio
Gandini,
privato, ma lei
with your
è stato anche
personal
pilota,
studio.
è stato
You are also
commissario, ma
a
lei
driver,
oggi
commissioner.
investe soprattutto di
Today
figlio d'arte,
you are
perché
here
suo papà
as
Cornelio
a son of
è stato
a man who
uno dei
preceded you.
protagonisti della
He was
Miglia
one of the main
storica.
characters of
Faccio
the
io un
historical
breve
Miglia.
riassunto prima
A
di
brief
lasciarle la parola.
summary before
Cornelio era
leaving the
del
floor to you.
23,
He was born in
è entrato giovanissimo
1923.
in Cisitalia
He
nel
joined Cisitalia in
46 e ha corso
1947,
e
and he raced
tutti i grandi
with
piloti del
all
dopoguerra
the main
a partire
drivers,
da
starting
Nuvolari.
from
Sul
Nuvolari
mio piazzamento
after the
è
Second World
stato
War.
un quinto
He,
posto.
his
Nel
highest rank was
48
the
in
fifth
coppia
place
con
in 1948
con
with
una
Scagliarini,
Cisitalia
with
202
Cisitalia
e già questo è
202
stata
Mille Miglia.
un ottimo
So
successo
this
per
was
lui.
a great win for him.
Yes,
poi
it was a
nel-
great success. Because then they had a failure, technical failure. They became position 93. And then Scotti, friend of Scagliarini, gave them some fuels and they continued until they were able to fix the car. in a bike shop, and they were
La
positioned
rimonta è
63.
incredibile.
It was an
Sono le cose
amazing
meravigliose che si
race
riescono a
that they
fare
could
alla
do.
Miglia.
Only things that happen at the Miglia. So they say that we have to
Ecco,
go all in
ma
until we can race, we race. And a small detail actually is that this car, number 15, that you see here, if you look at the above over there, we were talking
se
about
tiene più
windshields.
vicino ecco, così la sentiamo bene.
We were talking about
Sì.
windshield wipers. You see a wiper above. If the others were misfunctioning, if they
Innovazione,
break down,
certo.
that third one was a manual wiper that you could activate, which is something amazing if you think about
Ecco,
the logic of having a result with your car. You have to understand that Scagliarini came to Torino, and it is something even today strange to think. It was a very small company,
certo. Lui era stato un giocatore.
and actually president of the time of the Juventus football team. He was a player back then, a champion of many sports. But Italia used to build the Formula One Porsche, the 360 model, together with Vespa and Abarth. So the Germans trusted a small Italian company to manufacture Formula One. They started in 1947 with the rear engine and four-wheel drive. But in 47 they trusted Italians, a small company, and they were given the task of building these cars. So we're talking about innovation. Italia unfortunately closed down due to the high cost of manufacturing. What all the possible innovations, we're talking about materials, technology, they had it all.
È stato un grande laboratorio. Quindi
So
nel
it was a
48 quinto
great
posto,
lab. So in
ma nel
1948,
50 la
fifth
coppia
place, but in the year
Scagliarini-Mafiodo si
1950,
ripresenta
Scagliarini
alla Miglia
Mafiodo,
Emilia e
the
qui
pair,
sfuma
went
un
back to
secondo
Mille Miglia.
posto
And
perché
here they got very close to second place.
sul
Why?
podio
Because they
praticamente e
were
a un
on the
certo punto è
podium.
successo
But what
qualcosa.
happened? Well, this car was made for winning. Even though it had a smaller engine than the one of Ferrari, they were starting at 5:33 in the morning, as you can see from the number. They had a failure, they broke down the engine. So Scagliarini said, my brother started after me. If they arrive in a good time, we let him drop down from the car and we take his place. So Buffoni says the same. He got down from the car and his brother made the result. His brother arrived too late. That's the problem. And then he was the CEO of Abarth from the beginning until it was sold over to Fiat. So my father and Scagliarini split back then. My father brought the car back to Turin, and Scagliarini went to America, in the Venezuela specifically, because he was so ahead of his times that his girlfriend was a model from Venezuela.
Ha quindi
And
iniziato
he
una
went into
nuova
the
vita, diciamo.
highway business. So they split on the road close to Grottamare in Pedaso, on the road. In 2006, my mother picked up the phone and tells my father, there's somebody looking for you. And that person was Scagliarini,
Dopo 50 anni
who
era
50
tornato.
years later came back to him. Thanks to a journalist that knew both of them and put them back into contact. Unfortunately, I was not able to organize a real meeting between them. They gifted each other a cup, some memorabilia, but they were older already. So Scagliarini was a pilot of a torpedo airplane, you know. So they ate ships, and ships are also shooting back at the same time. Just imagine what kind of
Dopo una
pilot he
vita
was,
molto piena, direi.
what kind of
Paolo,
life he led up to that point.
Scagliarini, che
So,
sicuramente abbiamo
Paolo,
sentito era un
Scagliarini, we have
personaggio,
heard, was
è
a
stato colui
character.
poi che ha
And
aiutato
he was
Carlo
the
Abarth
one
a dare
who
avvio alla
helped
sua
Carlo
impresa.
Abarth
Tant'è che dalla
in
foto
opening
che
his
Se
abbiamo
vuoi fare
company.
un
visto,
passo indietro,
Well, if
la
you want to take a
collaborazione
step
tra la CISI
back,
Italia e Porsche,
CIS
per
Italia
Dusi,
and Porsche
proprietario
partnership
della
is
CISI
due
Italia,
to Dusi being
pagò
owner of
per
CIS
togliere
Italia,
dalle
and he
galere
paid
Ferdinand Porsche,
to free from the French
il
prison
progettista del
Ferdinand
regime, dal
Porsche,
cancellino
because
poi
he
della
was the
Porsche,
designer of
e
the
quindi
regime.
Porsche aveva grande riconoscenza
So Porsche was really
per Dusi.
grateful
Per cui
for
è tutto
Dusio.
un intreccio
è
di
So
tutto un
it's
personaggi
an
intreccio, sono storie
intertwining of
che si
people and
intrecciano.
character, histories of men of high value, men of other times that were cooperating,
La collaborazione con Abarth fu fantastica.
and the agreement with Abarth was amazing. Yes, with the performance in 1948 was the one who convinced them, because CIS Italia closed down in 1949.
E infatti
So
abbiamo
that's when it
visto che
all
la
ended.
205A
Yes, we've seen the
aveva sul
205A
cofano già
on
il
the hood
simbolo
already
dell'Abarth,
had
aveva
the
lo
Abarth
scorpione.
symbol, the scorpion, right? Yes. Was able to convince Guido Scagliarini that so that his father would pay up and found a team. He bought 4 cars from CIS Italia and they founded Abarth. For 1 year they kept the name CIS Italia, and then on 533 already you see the Abarth logo. And Dus himself went to Argentina later when CIS Italia went into bankruptcy, and they started producing vehicles with Navarone. You know, it's the same people always collaborating. And then later in 1984, I meet him in Pininfarina as well. Yes, it's a circle of people going and coming back. Because, you know, another example, on Stratos, on the car, the father of Cesare Fiori, Carlo, arrived in 1973, where Stratos was about at the end of its days. And he said, if you see how ugly it is, regardless, it will win everything. He was not a prophet in that sense, but never mind.
Bene, grazie per Angelo. Paolo,
Thank you,
torno
Angelo,
da
for
te.
that.
La Mille Miglia è
Paolo,
stata
going
foriera
back to
di
you,
tante sperimentazioni.
Mille
L'ha
Miglia brought
raccontato
forward
anche
many
prima Andrea
experimentation, and Andrea
Cartapani. C'è stato
Cartapani
addirittura un
was
periodo
talking
in
about
cui
that. There
c'era
was
una
a time
classe speciale
when there was a special class
dedicata ai
dedicated
carburanti succedanei.
to
Dobbiamo
alternative
precisare che era il
fuel.
periodo cosiddetto dell'autarchia, quando le sanzioni internazionali nei confronti
Yes, it was a time
del nostro paese
of sanctions, international sanctions, because back then we had fascism in Italy,
Eritrea o Abissinia, come si
who
diceva
attacked
allora, quindi
Eritrea or Abyssinia, as we used to call it. So we received sanctions, and due to that, we could not import oil
sabbia, ma ancora non
any longer.
petrolio. Per
We were in Libya, but we couldn't extract oil. So the Alfa Romeo, especially, wouldn't go only with fuel, but also with blends of methanol and other products. So they created the category substitute fuels, succedaneum fuels. There was one actually going with carbon,
Diciamo non il massimo sotto il fronte delle
with
sul
charcoal,
profilo
the same
delle
charcoal you
emissioni.
would use to heat yourself up in your house. So in 1936, the substitute fuel category was won by Ercole Boratto, who was the car driver of the Duce, the AC Pescara Alfa Romeo, using those fuels coming from the agricultural byproducts. This car was renovated in the 90s to race again in the Mille Miglia by a person from Vicenza, and underneath the chassis there were found
La benzina si usava,
tanks for fuel. So really,
non bastava l'aria.
to have that extra oomph, they would use fuel. He was the driver
Vabbè,
of the Duce,
chiusero un
so
occhio.
they
Lorenzo non è
let him
stato
race
quello
in
non è
that
stato
category, even
l'unico
though he
caso.
was not supposed to.
Di vetture,
And that was
parliamo di
not
Alfa
the
Romeo
only
naturalmente, ma non
case.
solo,
We're talking about Alfa
alimentate
Romeo,
con
and
carburanti
beyond,
alternativi, che
there
è
were
un tema
other
che è
cars
molto
going
di
with
attualità
substitute
anche
fuels.
oggi.
This is something very modern as a theme. Yes, but as Paolo was saying, the reasons were different and the results were different. In Alfa Romeo, which was a strong company already with production of cars going with gas, and talking about large vehicles that would have large tanks creating gas starting from charcoal. Someone tried to do that. Professor Ferragutti, the 1500, with this special situation, a tank behind it would generate gas through
Una
charcoal.
foto.
Maybe we have a picture of that. And he reaches the ending line, finish line, with 53 kilometers per hour on average, so
Eccola qua.
less than half the average done by Nuvolari, who was using a type of fuel. But what happened that year, 1936, there was a category where also the absolute race was won by car using substitute fuel, but not because they wanted to, because the Grand Prix Alfa Romeo cars were using fuels with alcohol bases, as they are overcharged engines, so commercial cars wouldn't reach the required performances. So there were mixtures of fuels, and they were kind of ethanol, benzol, water, and other types of oil that would later become ever more methanol. That is, alcohol coming from wood, from agricultural byproducts. In that case, Alfa Romeo won more than Mille Miglia with substitute fuels. In the comment of 1936 edition, they said, and it was the substitute fuel edition, while it was the two-core edition, because charcoal was used by nobody. And who won? Won with alcohol. But that's what they would do
Forse era
regardless.
troppo costoso per l'automotivismo, non lo
That's
usavano per
because
fare
it was
benzina.
too expensive for regular cars. But for racing cars, that was a long tradition. That fuel was being used for a better engine compression as well. And that is true that that fact gained high visibility, and Alfa Romeo had its role in all that because they tried all types of fuels, including gasoline, with
Bene, grazie.
lukewarm
Grazie
Piccolissima
Lorenzo.
results.
curiosità, la benzina era così rara anche
And
dal
one thing,
47
fuel was
dopo la
so
guerra
rare in
che
1947 after
siccome la
the
Mille
World
Miglia
War II,
garantiva due pieni di
and
benzina
Mille
e
Miglia
un treno di prima mano, ci
assured
si iscrissero alla
two
Mille Miglia nel
full
47 per le
tanks
150 e partivano
and
in
one tire
processione.
set.
Gli altri
Gli altri
So
aspettavano
there were so many
Avessero il
inscriptions, but
bottino
only a
e
few of them
se
started the
lo
race. They only
portarono a
wanted that
casa.
prize for them
Bene,
and not
bene.
have any race afterwards.
Pietro,
And I wanted to say that also Cheese Italia, as we are talking about that with Porsche, there was a book written on them and my father, and there's the formula of the fuel they would use, which is nuts. Which is not my field to talk about
bene,
that, but
Pietro,
it's really
lascio a
interesting.
te le
Well,
considerazioni
Pietro,
finali. No,
I'd
abbiamo
like to
visto
leave
quanta innovazione
the
c'è
final
stata, tra
considerations to
l'altro
you,
in un
because we've seen
periodo
how
che per
much
l'industria è
the
stato un
situation
periodo
there was over
difficilissimo, quello
that,
appena
because
prima
it was a
e
very
appena
tough
dopo la guerra,
sector
eppure è un
for
periodo
the
estremamente
industry
florido,
right
estremamente
after
ricco
the World War
di
II.
innovazioni.
But we saw many innovations. Well, yes, the effect was amplified by the fact that cars, with respect to the 1970 Industrial Revolution, was a very young sector. There was still a lot of research, innovation, and ideas going around. Then the war came, something senseless that mankind still does. And this is resetting everything. So imagine how many resources were lost. Excuse me.
c'è un momento di...
un momento di casual.
Lo spinterogeno
È lo-
che
è lo
aumenta
Sorry,
spinterogeno,
I lost my
esatto,
train of
che l'ho
thought.
lasciato.
I was having some technical issues.
Non sto lì a
So
raccontare
just
storie
imagine
così
how much
che mi
we
fa
have,
proprio
we have
cercare.
lost.
E quindi l'effetto è stato ancora
So
maggiore. Voi
the
immaginate
effect
che
was
alla
even
ripresa, no, c'era una
greater
voglia, una volontà che
when they resumed the
ognuno
races.
esprimeva una
Everybody
maniera, quindi tutti i
wanted to
progettisti,
express
quelli che avevano
their passion. So
un'idea,
all the designers,
cercavano di-
anybody with
certo.
ideas
riversato sul foglio
tried
bianco,
to pour
quell'idea anche
on
con quella
white
spinta,
canvas their
no,
ideas,
di
with
ricerca
the
di
drive
libertà per
for a
punta,
search for
recuperata
freedom
e così via.
that was once lost and then
Una storia
retrieved.
bellissima,
So
una
it's a
storia
great
bellissima.
Ed è
story.
nata l'auto moderna,
And
no?
that's
Perché
how
tutti quei
the
prodotti
modern
che
car
stavano
was
studiando
born.
prima della guerra,
Because
Poi da lì sono
all
confluiti.
those
l'integrazione delle
ideas,
forme,
such
la maglia.
as the integration
Bisogna
of the
dire
shapes,
che in tutto questo,
the
comunque,
materials,
la guerra ha lasciato un'eredità
that was scarred
inaspettata, cioè un
by
impulso
the
alla ricerca
World War II, but
aerodinamica,
also
alla ricerca
promoted
dei fluidi,
the aerodynamics
dei materiali
research, the
speciali, no?
fluid
Perché la
research,
guerra
and the
poi porta alla
special
ricerca
material,
estrema.
because war leads to
Mancanza, con la
extreme
mancanza.
research.
E quindi questo ha dato ulteriore spinta,
So
no?
this pushed
È
even
nata
more
veramente
forward
l'auto moderna,
the
no?
sector, and the modern car was
Bene.
born.
E bisogna chiudere
And
questa
we must
cosa
add that
dicendo
with
che
this,
aveva ragione sempre
Enzo Ferrari was always right, because
Che
he
la
used to
Mille Miglia
reiterate the fact that Mille Miglia
a fare le
taught
automobili.
Italians to
Con
build
quell'assurdo,
cars.
più o meno avevo usato una
Because
parola diversa che adesso non mi ricordo,
He
tracciato,
used special words, but
costrinse le
he said with
aziende
that
ad
crazy
adeguarsi,
track,
a trovare
companies
le
must
soluzioni
adapt and
per,
find solutions
risolvere le
to
problematiche.
solve the
Certo,
issues
davvero
in
un
front
sacco
of
di
them.
storie straordinarie, quelle
Many
della Mille
interesting
Miglia, noi
stories
staremo
about
qui a
Mille Miglia.
parlarne
We
ancora
would
per
love
ore,
to
ma
stay
purtroppo
here and
il
spend
tempo a
hours
nostra
talking about that.
disposizione
Unfortunately,
sta finendo
time at our
e
disposal
quindi
is
io
ending.
ringrazio
So I
tutti
would
voi,
like to
tutti i
thank
nostri
you all.
ospiti, grazie a Lorenzo
Thanks
Ardizio, a
to our
Pierangelo
guest,
Maffiodo,
Lorenzo Ardizio, Pierangelo
grazie
Maffiodo.
ai nostri esperti
Thanks to
Paolo
our expert
Mazzetti
Paolo
e Pietro
Mazzetti
Camardella.
and Pietro
E
Camardella.
per la fase finale, per i saluti
And for the
finali,
ending part, the
invito
final
qua a raggiungermi sul palco
words,
l'amministratore
I'd like to invite
delegato
here
di Mille Miglia
the
SRL, Fulvio
CEO
D'Alvia.
of
Grazie.
Mille Miglia SRL, Fulvio D'Alvia.
Thank you.
Buonasera.
Good evening. Good evening.
Buonasera. Allora, anche oggi
If,
questo talk
today,
sulla
this
storia dell'innovazione
talk about
attraverso
the history of
il potere della
innovation
Mille Miglia ci ha regalato
through
veramente
Mille
delle
Miglia.
storie incredibili.
We
Così come
had
l'anno scorso
wonderful
ce
stories,
l'aveva regalata
just like
quello
it happened
sul
last year
design e sullo
when we
stile,
talked about
con il quale abbiamo
design,
aperto questo appuntamento
with
che
which you
vogliamo
opened
che diventi
today's
una sorta di
event.
appuntamento
So
fisso
we would
di
like it to be a
inaugurazione
yearly
della Mille
event,
Miglia.
a
Quest'anno
way of
siamo,
inaugurating
come dire,
Mille
al
Miglia.
numero 99
Today
e
is the
quindi ci
99th
si
edition,
prepara
so we are
all'anno del
preparing for
centenario.
the centenary year. This is a very important time for us because we are approaching the centenary. It's also in terms of continuity of ideas we've been trying to develop as we develop our company. Especially, I would like to thank Sautini for her stimuli, for her inputs in terms of Registro Mille Miglia. It's not just something we need to analyze vehicles. We've always been pursuing content, analyzing things, thoughts. It's not just about celebrating and fun. It's also a moment of thinking over things. So it's a time for deep reflection. So I would say that these events, when you're integrating Mille Miglia, we try to carry on and maintain, keep in life the memory, not just through the means, the vehicles, but also the minds. What we heard today have been testimonials. It's been great fun listening to these stories from people who do not talk about things based on a theory, but they talk about the experience, what they saw with their own eyes. So this is a unique thing, and it's something that Mille Miglia should carry on. I am not in a position to, after this kind of expertise, the kind of people who've preceded me on this on the floor, it wouldn't be humble on my side to. But what I wanted to say was basically this has been about sharing some ideas It's often we say that Mille Miglia is a movable laboratory. Today I felt something else. I could perceive something else. I agree with the stories I had, but Mille Miglia is also a way of representing the made in Italy idea of doing things. We heard about we heard about the work of ingenuity. We heard about the ability to conceive something based on what you have, using
Molto italiana,
the
tra
resources you
l'altro.
have. And this is a very Italian way of doing things. So the wiper, the added wiper, because if it breaks, I can use one by hand. So it's about coming up with solution when the situation calls for it. So it's the ingenuity, having the cultural part of the ingenuity. That is the workmanship. That hearing to these testimonials from of the mechanic, I couldn't find the right word, for a whole night,
A mano,
you
a
know,
tornito.
milling, turning and milling on an object all night long. We could transfer this to many other parts of made in Italy. When you talk about the fashion industry, behind the industries, we have these skills. It is about using the mind and transferring it to the hands. So what really was about the hallmark of this period, we've heard about the stories. The thing that surprised me the most is that there's always been an incremental kind of innovation. So this is the main characteristic of the Made in Italy products. We've never been very strong in basic research, but the idea of improving step by step what we had studied previously. So this moment of Mille Miglia, every year was an opportunity to, we had the past experience, how can I take a step forward from there? So we have heard about many testimonials about talking about the need of having hybrid technologies. The watchmaker story, like Made in Italy is about making most of technology. That is the ability of taking things from a different department and transferring them to another. So this is a typical trait. You know, in a watch or in a clock, for it to work, everything, every single small part must work. So Italy's ability to transfer its sensitiveness, when Camardella was talking about what he tried at that specific time, that says that behind a design, you need the personality, the capacity to remember one's history. And the last element, which I loved a lot, it's about Alfa Romeo with the two teams. That's competition. Italy has very many small, medium enterprises. Most of them are in competition with each other, and this looks like a limitation. But then that has been the driving force behind innovation.
No, in realtà sono storie bellissime.
But all these are wonderful stories. And this is what I felt. I hope that it has been interesting for you all. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Those who joined us today, I would like to remind you that Registro Mille Miglia is information pool, a catchment where you can go and find out information and data. So we've been trying to carry on this kind of way of thinking to keep alive the memory and way of reasoning. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. It's a walk down the memory lane. So next year it's about the 100 years next year. So we look forward. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think for the final greetings and the ritual picture, I would call you all, Mr. Marco Pasquali, and all our guests, starting from Pietro Camardella, De Paolo Mazzetti, our two Virgilios, who've always been with us in these events.
e poi
And then
Francesco Forleo, Pierangelo
Francesco
Mafiodo,
Forleo, Francesco Mafiordo, Lorenzo Ardizio,
Sergio
Sergio Arieti and Andrea Cartapagli.
Grazie. Certamente il Presidente Sauttini.
The chair lady
Non abbiamo
Santini.
più il Presidente Bonomi, ma che
Mr.
temo che
Bonomi is
sia...
no longer here with us today.
Prego.
Vieni qua che lì
In
sei un
mezzo.
po' di
Prego.
lato.
Qui.
Naturalmente il
So,
ringraziamento va anche a tutti voi
Our
per
gratitude
averci
to all of you
ascoltati
who've been
e
listening to us.
l'appuntamento è
And our
per
next
domani
event
mattina, a partire
is tomorrow
dalle
morning
11:30
from
in Viale
11:30
Venezia
onwards in
per
Viale
la
Venezia
partenza
for
del
the
Frecciarossa
start of
e
the
noi ci rivediamo
Frecciarossa.
qui il prossimo anno
And
per
we
l'edizione
meet here
numero
next year
100 della
for
corsa
the
più bella del
100th
mondo.
edition
Grazie
of
a
the
tutti,
world's
buona
most
serata.
beautiful race. Thank you so much. A nice evening. Enjoy your evening.